Put your seatbelts on and get ready for the ride. We're the freaking New York Jets, so we're built for this shit.
Hello, welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. Today is Wednesday, August 27th. Hopefully everybody's having a good day so far today. This is episode 614 of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast. I thank you, as always, for joining me. For those tuning in on YouTube, make sure to please like and subscribe. Of course, appreciate all of those tuning in on all the different audio podcast platforms. And today we are breaking down and reacting to the New York Jets 2025 initial 53-man roster that was released yesterday. Took a little while. Final roster cuts were supposed to be in by 4 o'clock, but the New York Jets waited up until I think it was exactly 7:49 Eastern until the actual 53-man roster was finally released. So they waited a couple hours, came out later on yesterday. So today here, as we approach the early afternoon, figured I'd get a video out breaking down the initial 53. And it's, of course, a very fluid situation over the next 24 to 48 hours. You'll have waiver claims today. You'll see if any trades happen with the Jets, any other moves as they fill out their practice squad, add, take away, subtract to this 53-man roster. Because, again, it is the initial 53-man roster. Things can still change. But wanted to get an episode out today breaking down and reacting to the initial 53, what it looks like, biggest surprises, my thoughts, and even break down to some potential areas of improvement still and some potential waiver claims that the New York Jets can still go out and try and make here. Darren Muji will speak a little bit later on today, so we'll hear from him as well. We'll start here as we did with the prediction video, just go down the list position by position. Some positions, of course, more surprises than others. You start with the quarterback spot. No real surprise here. Jets keep 2, Justin Fields, Tyrod Taylor. I think the big question now is I'd expect Brady Cook to land on this team's practice squad. Adrian Martinez, of course, was waived. Brady Cook was also waived, but it seems like Brady Cook will be back from a practice squad standpoint. It'll be interesting to see. There is still some discussion and some thoughts amongst the fan base that the Jets maybe go out and bring in another quarterback, a veteran, potentially somebody else, just in case if Tyrod's not ready for week 1. Even though Glenn and everybody has said that he will be ready, there has been a little bit of concern and a little bit of skepticism and potential, let's go out and bring in a veteran or bring in a McCord or somebody like that. I don't think that'll happen. I think it'll end up just being Brady Cook. But from the first 2 quarterbacks, no surprise, it's Fields, it's Tyrod. Those are your 2. You roll with those guys and see what happens. And then really just a practice squad arm will be the next one, assuming that's probably going to be Brady Cook. In terms of the running back position, also no real surprises. We talked about Donovan Edwards a lot this summer, had the big game against the Green Bay Packers, had flashed as well in camp. Just in terms of special teams and it came down to a numbers game, it was tough to find a role for him. It was tough to find a spot for him on this 53-man roster. So the New York Jets roll with Breece Hall, Braylon Allen, Isaiah Davis, Kene Nwangu. Nwangu's your kick returner. Donovan Edwards just not being able to have that full role on special teams, not be able to carve out a role there, ultimately led to him being released. So no real surprise. If the Jets can get Donovan Edwards back on the practice squad, I think that would be a really, really nice piece to have as depth and kind of a developmental piece on the practice squad for this Jets team moving forward. But other than that, no surprises. You knew Nwangu was going to make this team as your kick returner and 4th running back. And I'll say this, Nwangu actually has flashed a bit this summer too as a runner, not just from a kick returning and special teams perspective, but he's flashed a bit from a running back perspective. And we know what this run game is going to be about. It's going to be the identity of this team. It's going to be the focus of this offense. Glenn has talked about it time and time again about using all 3 running backs in Breece Hall, Braylon Allen, and Isaiah Davis. So those are your 4 running backs. No real surprises there either. Now, we move on to the wide receiver position. I think this is where you get your first surprise. So the New York Jets roll with 6. Of course, you have your 4 locks. That was Garrett Wilson, Josh Reynolds, Allen Lazard, Tyler Johnson. Or I apologize. Garrett Wilson, Josh Reynolds, Tyler Johnson, Arian Smith. Those are your 4 locks. And the final two spots, you could make a case for a couple different guys going into yesterday. You had Xavier Gipson, you had Jamal Pritchett, you had Quentin Skinner, you had Brandon Smith, heck, even Malachi Corley and Lazard. You kind of had all those guys in that final spot there, fighting for those final two spots. More so, though, you had Pritchett, Quentin Skinner, and Brandon Smith fighting for what felt like the sixth spot, because I thought Pritchett was going to make this team. I thought he had a better summer, better preseason than Xavier Gipson. He fits exactly into the Xavier Gipson role, but I thought Pritchett just did it better. So I am very surprised that Pritchett didn't make this team. We'll get to him more here in a second. Lazard does make this team. And not that that was much of a surprise, but I think Lazard being healthy ultimately eliminated Brandon Smith and Quentin Skinner from making this team, because their avenue to make this team would have been Lazard being on short-term IR, which is what I did in my 53-man roster prediction. I put Lazard on short-term IR, and that opened up a spot for Brandon Smith, and I also had Pritchett making this team. Instead, there's all six guys, or the final two spots of that group of six, Alan Lazard, Xavier Gipson, both guys that have been here now for a couple of seasons. So no new faces there. The Jets elect to move on from Brandon Smith, move on from Quentin Skinner, and move on from Jamal Pritchett, which I will say I do disagree with that. I would have liked to seen Brandon Smith or Quentin Skinner make this team over Alan Lazard, even if Lazard was healthy. I know they like him as a blocker, but fresh blood, young blood, I don't think is a bad thing. You know what you're getting out of Alan Lazard. Why not go with a little bit of the higher ceiling? Yeah, maybe it's a little bit more of an unknown, but take a chance on Brandon Smith, one of those younger guys who can maybe carve out a role for himself, not just this year, but beyond. And Xavier Gipson's really surprising to me. I really thought Pritchett just completely outplayed him in every area. I know he had the muff punt that he did end up recovering, but against the Eagles, I get all that. But to me, he's shown as a better returner, and he's also shown too, in my opinion, just to be a better receiver than Gipson. And I know that doesn't mean a whole lot, because Gipson or Pritchett's not going to be used a ton in this passing offense. They're essentially the sixth receiver, but your punt returner. But even that, I thought Pritchett was better than. Now, it feels like the Jets' approach to this is the Jets have Gipson now as your punt returner. They also like Arian Smith. They've used him a bit. Do they like him as well, potentially playing a role on special teams for this Jets team here in 2025? So that could have certainly gone into the decision-making as well. But I would have really liked to seen Pritchett make this team. And while I understand, because I don't really understand the Pritchett over the Gipson at all, Pritchett's to me just better, as I mentioned. The Lazard thing I understand a little bit more just because now he's healthy. And that was the way Brandon Smith or Quentin Skinner would have made this team, is if Lazard was on short-term IR. That was the most realistic case. I don't think they were just going to flat out cut Alan Lazard. So again, things are fluid. Things can still change. I don't think it's any guarantee that Gipson's on this team week one. Right now he is. We'll see what happens with waiver claims. There's wide receivers out there that the Jets could bring in and potentially replace Gipson, but those are your six you roll with right now. None of the summer standouts make the team. In terms of the tight end position, Mason Taylor, Jeremy Ruckert, Stone Smart all make the team. No real surprises here. I know there was some potential that Jeremy Ruckert would get cut, and I still think there is a reality similar to the wide receiver room that there is going to be changes to this tight end room over the next couple days with waiver claims, trades, all that stuff. And I think there is a real chance that one of Ruckert or Stone Smart, most likely Ruckert, might not be on this team, or at least might not be active week one, potentially not on this team either. If they go out and make another move, bring in another piece at the tight end spot. But at least for now, no real surprises there. The big one would have been cutting Ruckert, but I didn't see that happening. I thought they would keep him and also keep a fullback, which they did. Andrew Beck makes the team. First signing under Darren Muji, has the connection with Darren Muji from Denver. Lions have used a fullback. Engstrand's familiar with using a fullback. He, of course, had the big preseason game against the Green Bay Packers. This is going to be a Jets offense that's going to run the football a lot. We all know that. He's going to be a blocker in the run game. And we've also seen him at times, too, in training camp in some short down and distances get the football and be utilized as a rusher as well in the 3rd and 1, 3rd and short, 4th and short situations. So Andrew Beck's going to play a role in this team. He makes this roster. That is something that I did see coming. So those are the skill positions. In terms of the trenches on the offense, Jets kept 4 offensive tackles: Olu, Membu, Chuck Okafor, and Max Mitchell. No real surprises there. Carter Warren released. You heard some potential trade rumors with him. Couldn't get any done, so they move on from Carter Warren. But tackles, you've got your 2 left tackle, right tackle, hopefully your 2 cornerstones at those positions for a very long time in Olu and Membu. And then you've got your depth pieces in Okafor and Max Mitchell. In terms of the interior offensive line, a bit of a surprise here that they kept 10. I thought they would keep only 9, but they kept 10. So they kept 6 interior offensive linemen and only the 4 offensive tackles. I thought they would only keep 5 interior offensive linemen, but they did instead keep 6. So ABT, John Simpson, Joe Tittman, those players, of course, they all make the team. That's your starting interior. Yes, Tittman's going to start at center. I doubt it's Josh Myers. Tittman should start at center. I've said that many times. And then your depth pieces, Xavier Newman, Josh Myers. We knew that, but they also keep Marquise Hayes. So that was a bit of a surprise. I thought they would keep only 9 offensive linemen, but they keep 10. You can never have enough offensive linemen, I guess, right? So keep a little extra depth there in the interior. So 10 offensive linemen, but all in all, no real surprises other than Marquise Hayes making the roster, but no real surprise cuts from that standpoint. And then, of course, we'll see how the practice squad plays out. But those are your 10 offensive linemen. You got your 2 centers. You've got your 4 backup, or your 2 backup guards, essentially, in Hayes and Newman. And then you've got your starting guards in ABT and Simpson. You've got your starting tackles in Olu and Membu, and your backup tackles in Okafor and Max Mitchell. So that's the offense. Moving on now to the defensive side of the football. Jets kept 10 defensive linemen. We'll start in the interior here. Quinnen Williams, Harrison Phillips, Jay Tufele, Jawan Briggs, and Leonard Taylor are your 5 defensive tackles. No real surprises here. Leonard Taylor was the only one that you could make the case that if Byron Cowart was healthy, or even if he wasn't healthy, that he maybe didn't make the roster. Peyton Page is a guy that actually made a very strong push this summer. But Leonard Taylor does make the team. I'm happy about that. And something interesting to note, I think Leonard Taylor, by the way, fits in really nicely to this defensive line rotation in terms of, I've always said this about Leonard Taylor. I don't think Leonard Taylor is a guy that exactly fits very well next to Quinnen starting, because he struggles against the run. But his ability as a rotational pass rusher and essentially your 4th to 5th defensive tackle is just shows you how much deeper this room is today than it was a week ago before the Harrison Phillips trade and the Jawan Briggs trade. Harrison Phillips, of course, starting next to Quinnen Williams now as that run stopper. Quinnen Williams, of course, that do-it-all pass rusher. Now, one thing to note, though, with the defensive tackle room, the Jets placed 2 players on IR. One of them was Byron Cowart, but on the NFL transaction wire, it doesn't seem like it's a short-term IR situation. It seems like Cowart, at least on the transaction wire, it's season-ending IR. So that's something interesting to note. If they put him on season-ending IR, he's done, and there's a chance the Jets and Cowart could have a roster settlement, and he could be let go and have the chance to sign somewhere else. But I thought Cowart would be a short-term IR candidate. It seems like he's on season-ending IR, which would lead you to believe his season's over. And that could also be the big reason, too, behind the whole Harrison Phillips and Jawan Briggs trade is Cowart being done for the year. They said, let's go out and really bulk up here. But that, of course, also opened up the door for Leonard Taylor. So defensive tackle depth looks a lot better. You got Briggs, you got Phillips, you've got Jay Tufele, who's had a great summer, and Leonard Taylor, who's flashed last year, flashed in the preseason last year, flashed again in the preseason this year. He's a player to keep an eye on moving forward. In terms of the edge room, Jermaine Johnson, Will McDonald, Those, of course, are your starters. Michael Clemens, Tyler Barron, Braden McGregor rounding out the depth. Eric Watts gets cut. This was how I saw it playing out. I thought Braden McGregor, especially the last week of camp, really popped. The final 2 practices, he was excellent. He had a really good preseason game against the Eagles on Friday. So he made a late push, ended up making the team. Barron makes the team as well. I personally don't think Barron did much of anything this summer, but you're not going to see many GMs just give up on a draft pick, especially their first draft, one summer in. So Barron does make this team. Watts gets cut. Other than that, though, no real surprises on the defensive end. We all know Rashad Weaver, of course, was placed on season-ending IR, so that ends his season and his time potentially here with the Jets as well. So those are your 5 defensive ends. All in all, no real surprises from the defensive line room other than Byron Cowart season-ending IR instead of just short-term IR. And I guess maybe some thought Watts would get in over McGregor. I thought McGregor, though. I didn't think Watts did a whole lot this camp. And Leonard Taylor, I really like, and I think he certainly deserves a role on this roster. In terms of the linebackers, once Jamin Davis was released, you really had a pretty good idea of how this would shape out in the event that they kept 5, and they did end up keeping 5. Quincy Williams, Jamian Sherwood, Kiko Malinois, Marcelino McCrary-Ball, and they do keep Zaire Barnes. Now, the big question with the linebacker room was whether or not Barnes or Jamarcus Weston would make the team. And Jamarcus Weston was placed on short-term IR. So that opens up the door for Barnes to make this roster. You know, Barnes consistently has shown some flashes throughout the last couple of summers since being drafted. And somebody to, keep around as kind of a developmental piece in the back end of this linebacker room. Marcelino McCrary-Ball, really strong start to the summer, cooled off as the camp and preseason went on, but really strong start. He makes this team over Davis. That's potentially your linebacker 3. And then you've got the rookie in Kiko Malinois, who also makes the team, of course, one of 2 Miami draft picks, him and Tyler Barron. So those are your 5 linebackers. And Weston, you feel like once he comes back, kind of that special teams versatile piece from that standpoint. In terms of cornerbacks, Jets keep 5 cornerbacks. So I had them keeping 6, and I had them keeping 1 less offensive lineman. I had them keeping 9 O-linemen and 6 cornerbacks. They instead elect to go with 10 O-linemen. Marquise Hayes makes the team. And as a result of that, Jarek Bernard-Converse, JBC, is cut. So your 5 corners are Sauce, Brandon Stevens, Michael Carter. Those are your starters. And then your 2 depth pieces are Quantez Stiggers and A.Z. Thomas. I would have liked to seen JBC make this team. I think his versatility, can play a bit of safety, can play a bit of corner, good on special teams. I thought he had a really good training camp. Would have liked to see him make this team. Is it the end of the world? No. Is Jarek Bernard-Converse? And I want to preface that as well. Jamal Pritchett not making the team. Jarek Bernard-Converse not making the team. These depth pieces, these players 48, 49, 50 on a 53-man roster are not going to make or break whether the Jets win week 1, are not going to make or break whether the Jets win 10 games or 7 games, right? But still, depth perspective, I would have liked to seen JBC make this team. And who knows, maybe they stash him on the practice squad. I think he'll probably get claimed. We'll see. But those are your 5 corners. You got the rookie in A.Z. Thomas. You've got Stiggers, who, enters year 2 here as a really valuable piece on special teams, and a guy that has shown he can step up as well, playing corner, which he showed last year, showing a bit in camp this year in the preseason. He's a nice piece to have on this roster. So those are your corners. In terms of the safety room, you have the 4 safeties. No real surprises here as well. Cisco, Tony Adams, Malachi Moore, and Isaiah Oliver. Those 4 make the team. Jarius Monroe got cut. That's not a surprise, right? As much as I said in my last episode, I wish I was trying to find a way to get Jarius Monroe on the roster, but every time you'd find a way to get him in, it'd be at 54. You'd be a little too many. Just an odd man out number situation at that point. But you roll with the veterans, and then you've got the rookie in Malachi Moore. I think there's a really good chance that Malachi Moore starts at some point this season. They did waive Jordan Clark as well, although it seems as if they will try and get him back on the practice squad. Dean Clark got waived as well. He had a pretty good summer, so we'll see how many of these guys stick around if they go unclaimed on the practice squad, but those are your 4 safeties. And in terms of special teams, Nick Folk, Austin McNamara, Thomas Hennessy, they all make the team. No surprises there. Mention the 2 IR players in Byron Coward and Jamarcus Weston. Irv Charles is also on the PUP list. And one other note that I just wanted to mention with Malachi Corley, I wanted to bring that up here as well. You know, like I said, I would have liked to seen one of Pritchett, Skinner, Brandon Smith make the team. None of them do. They go with Xavier Gibson and Alan Lazard instead. But I do want to talk a little bit about Malachi Corley because this is a guy that, I mean, yesterday, the news becoming official, we all knew he was going to get released, but news becoming official just makes it more of an emphasis. And I've talked about this a couple times, but I want to bring it up again because I think now is fitting with Corley getting cut here. The emphasis on Darren Muji moving forward to find ways to get offensive talent and just talent in general, but specifically offensive talent in the middle rounds of the draft, because that is something that plagued Joe Douglas, right? We praised Joe Douglas for, Garrett Wilson and even Breece Hall. I get Breece Hall was a day 2 pick, but that was early in day 2. And that wasn't really like a middle to late round roster gem. Everybody knew Breece Hall was a stud coming out of college. That was an obvious pick, right? But outside of that, the swing and misses from Joe Douglas, the Denzel Mimses, the Elijah Moores, the Jeremy Rucker, now you throw Malachi Corley in the mix. It was a complete disaster, and that's something that plagued Douglas. Something Douglas was able to do well was find defensive talent, hidden gems, whether that was somebody like JFM or even Quincy Williams. Bryce Huff was a UDFA prior to him leaving. He did have a knack and an ability to find under-the-radar defensive talent. Could never find anybody, though, on the offensive side of the football. Never. Especially in day 2 and day 3, round 3 of the draft. I mean, you look at some of those picks, like I mentioned, they were ugly. And even just some of the other draft picks from Douglas. I mean, Jabari Zuniga was terrible. And you go down the list even prior to Douglas, you had the Chuma Dogas of the world, Josiah Polite or Darius Stewart, Nathan Shepard. I mean, there's so many just dead weight that the New York Jets have drafted over the year in round 3, round 2, day 3, that is where really good teams separate themselves from bad teams. Now, you look at the Rams, for example, year in and year out, they are finding gems on day 2 and day 3 of the draft. You can't just hit on your first round picks. That's important, but you've also got to be able to hit on day 2 and day 3, and even UDFA sometimes as well, waiver wires, all that stuff. Malachi Corley is a prime example of a Douglas swing and miss, and something that Darren Muji has to be able to correct during his time here. This is a guy that didn't want to play special teams. He had some maturity issues. That just rubs you the wrong way immediately. I mean, let's be real here, Malachi Corley. You're coming from Western Kentucky, and you're coming in with this big ego of, I'm not playing special teams. I'm a receiver, all this stuff. You heard last year that there was some issues with him inside the building in terms of just his maturity and preparing for games and all that stuff. I mean, you're from Western Kentucky. You're not coming from Alabama. You're not coming from LSU. Let's pump the brakes there with some of that. I'm this big shot. And I mean, the guy was working with the third teams. He never showed anything in camp and preseason. He never showed you anything. Never showed you anything last year. His highlight of his Jet career is dropping the ball before he crossed the plane against the Houston Texans. That was his highlight of his NFL career so far. And I also think too, we've seen Darren Muji and Glenn already here. They extended Garrett. They extended Sauce. They re-signed Sherwood. It doesn't matter if you're from the previous regime or not. If you're a good player and you are somebody that they feel fits this roster, you're going to make this team. So flat out, it was clear as day that they just felt Corley was not good and just didn't fit in this offense. And you go all the way back to the summer when he was, or spring rather, when he wasn't healthy. You knew this was coming. So this was no surprise, but I wanted just to talk about Corley and the need moving forward for Darren Muji to do the opposite of what Joe Douglas did in the middle rounds of the draft with offensive talent. Right? He's got to be able to find offensive talent in the middle rounds. Can Arian Smith finally be the first receiver in forever that the Jets find? I know it's day 3, but find in the middle rounds of this draft in the 4th round with Arian Smith that turns out to be something? We'll see. That'll be one of the first moves for Darren Muji for us to grade him on. Will be Arian Smith and how that all plays out. So Malachi Corley's time with the Jets is done, and we'll look back at Malachi Corley and put him on the long list of wide receiver draft busts by the New York Jets taken outside of day number 1, and put him to the long list of misses from Joe Douglas. So that's the Jets 53-man roster and some of my thoughts on Malachi Corley as well. We'll be back. Stay tuned. We'll have a lot more content coming your way here in the coming days, potentially 2 later today. Muji will speak. We'll have, of course, any waiver claims, any trades. We'll discuss it. We'll break it all down. So appreciate you all so much for the support. Make sure to please like and subscribe again. And until next time, JETS, 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 Jets.